Okay, now let's talk about signal flow. So this seems more complicated than it actually is, so stay with me, and I promise you will have a much richer and better understanding of sound design when you can understand how signal flow works. How a sound is routed from beginning to end and how it flows through the different parts of this synthesizer schematic. So stick with me, we'll get through it. In the center window, if you select the routing tab, you can see a schematic here. This visually shows you what the signal flow in Massive is. It follows the sort of common classic subtractive synthesis method. So let's go through what's happening here. We have 4 sources of audio over here. We have 3 oscillators and a noise generator. If you're wondering where the modulation oscillator fits in, you'll notice that the modulation oscillator doesn't actually produce any audio in the signal chain, it just modulates the other audio generators. So that's why it's not included. At the bottom, you have a feedback bus, which will grab audio from a different part in the chain, which will grab the audio from a different part in the chain, and it will bring it back at a certain point where you assign it to create a feedback loop. You can see directly to the right of these audio sources, you have some insert selectors. Insert 1 and insert 2. That means that you can select these and drop those inserts into the processing chain. After that, the signal will move on to the 2 filter buses. We'll talk later on about the difference between serial and parallel filter routing. And so that's what this center line indicates. This would be when the filters are in series, where the signal goes into filter 1 and then down into filter 2. Parallel means that the signal from the audio generators goes into both filters at the same time and then gets mixed down over here. So after the filters, our signal moves into the amplitude and panoramic section. Then it moves down into the Master Effects 1, Master Effects 2, the equalization section, and then the master output. These master effects can be activated up here, as well as the equalization. And it goes through all of these 3 one at a time. So that's just something to remember, that the output from the Master Effects 1 will be sent into FX2. And that can sometimes be important depending on which effects you're choosing. And similar, the EQ is last, and the master section is simply the global output. So now let's go back and talk about the feedback bus down here. So basically, this is telling Massive at which point in your signal chain to send back the signal to the feedback generator. And then that output goes into either inserts 1 or 2. And as I mentioned, you can place the inserts in different places like this by selecting them. So you can decide where you want them to be in your processing chain, but just know that it can only be in one place. So you can't have the insert 1 before the filter and after. You can only choose one. Next to the audio generators, I can also click on this letter B. That indicates the bypass. This is me telling Massive to bypass the rest of the chain and just send a clean version of this audio generator to the end of the chain. So this is signal flow, and as I mentioned, it's not as scary as it looks. especially to those of us who don't have audio or electrical backgrounds. So just to recap, audio generators goes into filter 1 and or filter 2, then over here to our amp and pan section, then to the two effects, the EQ and the master output. So it's just as simple as that. Plus, you have the feedback that you can select in different places and the inserts that you can select in different places. So that's how signal flow works in Massive. Now that you have that in your toolbox, you'll be able to have a much better understanding of what sound design is. See you in the next lecture.